towns, which is actually Frenchman's Bay Regional Shellfish Program. So it's the city of Ellsworth, which has no open flats. If you're digging there, you're going to have some problems, probably internally, from the wastewater treatment plant. Trenton, which half of Trenton is also closed due to the wastewater treatment plant as well. And then Lamoine, Hancock, Sullivan, Franklin, Sorrento. There we go. That's it. That's all 7. So I've been doing this job for about 2 years, and during this time we have seen a pretty significant decline in licensed sales, specifically. Although Taunton River, Hog Bay, the whole system here is one of the most productive flats in the state of Maine. So Frenchman's Bay Shellfish Program led state landings in 2024. So we had the highest clam landings in the state of Maine, between all 7 towns. And the majority of that came out of this ecosystem here. And that's where you'll find most of the shellfish harvesters stay in this area. They rarely go onto the outside in the summer when the price is really high. They end up going out into other areas to dig clams. Incidentally, that's where I find most of the people poaching is on that side. But up here, it's all licensed legal harvesters, and they have specific areas that they keep going to time and time again. I know from walking around that there seems to be plenty of clams spread out fairly evenly all along Taunton River. But one of the problems with the harvesting methods that's the most popular that we have is actually pulling clams. So they don't dig clams with a hoe. Some people do. And a lot of guys, they might take a hoe, but a lot of guys prefer pulling clams out of the mud. It's quicker, it's more efficient, they know how to do that. So the pulling mud specifically has decreased and decreased and decreased over time, which has left the clams up in the clay on the sides, which is much harder digging, especially when it's 92 degrees out like it was today. And the tide was at 12 o'clock. I know I was walking around checking people and I was sweating buckets, and I couldn't imagine digging a bushel of clams like the guy I checked today. So, but this is a pretty unique ecosystem we have here, obviously, because the tidal falls. This is an advantage to Frenchman's Bay as a whole, because if you're really proactive harvester, you can harvest on the outside for a couple hours and then come up here and harvest here, because there is an 1.5 to 2 hour tide difference because of the falls. And I'll find that during peak season when the price is $5, $4, $5, $6 a pound, that's what people are doing. They're trying to get as much money as they can out of it. For closures on this map, who here has ever seen this map before? So this is, anybody rec dig here? Like recreationally dig shellfish? Okay, all right, I'm glad you've seen the map. Because I actually find a lot of rec diggers who are in closures and they don't know. And I just warn them and have them put their clams back and, don't do it again. But, so our major closures, biotoxin or environmental closures, are red. And that is where you absolutely do not want to harvest a clam. It may not kill you, it may make you really sick, or it may not, depending on your health. But like I warned a gentleman in Goose Cove in Trenton, who'd been digging clams in an environmental closure for years, and he argued with me he's never gotten sick, and I'm like, well, it's still an environmental closure, you can't be here. And he might have an immune system, but he could give those to his relatives that don't, and they could have a really big problem. And then you have the blue lines you also have like conditional closures, which are conditional for various times throughout the year. Depending on, a lot of it has to do with runoff and drainage in the spring. You'll see most of those have closures from like May to June. Some of them vary. Some have summer, some are winter, but most of them that I've noticed, especially in Hog Bay, tend to be spring runoff. That's what they're closed for. And then you have our pink closures. In the pink closures, are all our conservation areas. That we're actively trying to conserve the shellfish that are there. And some of these areas have been hit very hard, like Tinks in Franklin. It's a very productive flat when it is productive, but it's a very small flat. And we will open it up and 20 people may be there in a day digging. And it's only a few acres. So that obviously extinguishes the resource, so we have to put it on rotation, and that's why we have these things on rotation, so they don't get over-harvested constantly. And then Egypt, you'll see this one here, Egypt Stream, that has two different closures on it. That has a environmental for a section of it, and then a conservation for another section. Egypt Stream is a little contentious within our program because it hasn't been harvested in 20, 30 years because of there used to be a cow farm that was there and fecal coliform, and so it was closed off for a very long time, and now a portion of it's opened up. But there is a very healthy large clam population in there that have been untouched for a long period of time, and there's an argument to be made to leaving them there to spawn and create more clams. So, do we have any questions about closures? Yes?
How does a clam digger figure out the boundaries of those other than looking at the map?
Good question. Okay. So, state closures used to have red posts that they would drive in quite regularly. That still does happen from time to time. The red closures will have red posts that are driven in, and you'll look through binoculars and see a red post. And then there'll be a red post on the other point, and they go point to point on purpose, and they write that in the closure language, so you can know where your point is, and you can look across. You can be standing at one post and look straight across, and find the other one. What we have done for our conservation closures is we've started putting in orange posts. So it's a bright fluorescent orange post with FBRSP on it, and it's driven into the ground, and you can see that with binoculars. Or I have painted trees orange, so if you see a tree that's painted orange, there's a reason for it. And that's to give the harvesters the line. They often like to harvest right on the line, but any other questions? Yes.
Is access to those flats a problem?
It's becoming a problem, more and more. As I know that probably many of you from the way, but as I say that in the best possible way. But as that's happened, and we've had a lot of people that have moved here since COVID, there's been a large influx of people that came here. They've started to restrict access, or they don't understand traditional Maine access laws. I get calls from people that are complaining that people are harvesting clams in front of their house, and because they own the flat. And I'm like, well, you don't own the flat. You don't own below the high water mark. And that is absolutely shocking to them. But that is a common occurrence.
I think Maine state law allows shoreline property owners to load open to the low tide line, but shellfish harvesters are allowed to, with a license, operate in the intertidal zone. So in Maine, shoreline property owners own the low tide line or 100 rods out.
Okay. And it's that conflict, it's a natural conflict we have constantly. And oftentimes with shellfish harvesters, they get lumped in with worm harvesters. So more often than not, people will call me to complain that there's a shellfish harvester that's parked illegally in their driveway, or they're harvesting clams in a closed area, so on and so forth. And I get there and I look at it for 3 seconds and I determine it's somebody digging worms. And worms don't have nearly the same, actually they don't have any restrictions on worms, other than you have to have a license. So that's a contention. Yes? Yes?
Yeah, the question is, you said dig or pull clams? For
Yes.
someone who knows nothing about that. You dig with a shovel and you...
You dig with like clam hoe, which is what we all probably traditionally think of a clam digger doing. And then pulling, they're looking through really soupy mud, and they're looking for the clam hole, and they're actually reaching into the clam hole and pulling the clams out of the clam hole. And that is the preferred method, at least up here. In other parts of the state, that's not the preferred method.
Does anybody?
Got sort of a question in this statement. Back in the 70s when I was first overwintering, I was doing some clamming, and the old timers would tell me that it was good to turn over the mud. I'm wondering about the Egypt steam spot because it loosened up the mud and made it easier for the clams to go up and down. Is there any thought on, well, maybe we should do a limited harvest? Or?
Well, I think there's a thought of that.
Right.
That may be part of the problem that we have, but I haven't specifically read any scientific studies on that to say if that is the case or not, if it's healthy for clams to be done.
The other thing they were telling me was that an ice winter was a good winter because it kept people from harvesting in the flats.
Right.
Gave the clams
That's true.
a break. We haven't had that kind of winter in a long time.
We did last winter.
Yeah, last winter we did.
Yeah. And so some other details about the program, and this goes into oysters. So we regulate all 6 species of shellfish that we are allowed to regulate, which are soft shell clams, hard clams, American oysters, European oysters, razor clams, and surf clams. So we regulate them all. Some programs choose to regulate just soft shell clams. We regulate them all. The only people I have had contact with for oyster harvesting, wild oysters, is recreational harvesting of wild oysters. And specifically, that is in Hog Bay, where I got a gentleman who had a bushel of wild oysters, and he just picked them up off of the mud. They were just laying flat out on the mud. So that goes to exactly what you were saying earlier. They're growing naturally just out in the mud. The seed's gotten loose, and they settle in the harder areas or on rocks. I've walked out through that area just to see where they are. And that's exactly where there are little stream beds that's flat, rocky. They're all just kind of laying flat there. And you can tell an aquaculture oyster that's done that because they're large, flat, and curved because they're not attached to anything. Whereas an oyster naturally attaches, and they have a flat spot on them if you take them off. The aquaculture oysters do not have that. Yes?
Just a question. Back, I think it was in the 40s, it was the Department of Sea and Shore Fisheries maybe. They tried to seed some European oysters, Bouillon oysters up in Hog Bay somewhere. I have no idea where. Nobody's seen any wild Bouillon oysters.
I have never seen one.
Yeah, okay. The thing I heard was that they didn't take. So.
Yeah. So it's all American oyster.
Yeah.
And it's becoming more and more prevalent. There are areas in Trenton that the shore is starting to become covered with oysters in the rocky shore. You lift up the seaweed and there's a ton of juvenile or younger oysters that are in there.
Only in the warm water spots.
Better, yeah.
The only clamming I've ever seen done is on Cape Cod.
Yeah.
They have a rake. It looks
Yes.
like a time rake
Co-op,
with a
Yeah.
basket on it.
Yep.
So what does a clam hole look like?
Well, it's a rake, except you have a handle this way and you have the tines that go like that.
It does have time?
Yeah, it has tines, but there's no basket on the end.
Okay.
That's for quahog harvesting specifically. And we do have quahogs here as well. And this program recently is going through the process of setting a maximum size for quahogs, which is a 3-inch maximum size for quahog. Yes, sir?
In Maine, are you allowed to use that quahog rake to dig quahogs and annoying surf clams? Or do you have to use the hand rake?
You can use any hand tool to harvest shellfish.
Okay.
You can't use mechanized
Yeah.
tools.
So you can use a shovel?
Yes. Yep. So you can use a shovel, you can use a spade if you wanted to.
Oh, yeah, no.
And I have seen it. So
I was just asking, I thought you had to use a little rake.
no,
My back hurts.
it's designed specifically over generations of use
Yeah.
to be the perfect instrument for digging soft shell clams.
So shovels are legal.
Yes.
Hearing it from you make me feel better.
Oh, yeah. You can't electrocute clams though. That's true. Yes.
Yes, the little section that goes down to the carrying place, is that pink or red? I can't.
It's, right. So there was a conditional closure there, but it's now a conservation closure for Frenchman. Water quality has changed. But
And that one is open in the winter.
yes, it's open in the winter.
Antique.
Oh, well, thank
Oh.
you. This looks like my father's. I have one exactly like this. It's like
Antique.
in there, but that's what they're using. If they're digging on the shore, I mean, they're now a lot of them have like metal handles and they're welded. No, it's screwed in. Yes, sir.
Sorry.
No, you're fine.
Can you describe how many, the age and the age range of the commercial fisher, clam diggers?
Okay.
that are
Yeah, we'll get into some
town?
demographic information.
Yeah, right,
Because that is something that is very critical to us right now.
right.
Our program specifically is funded by licensed sales. The towns contribute some finances to the program, but the majority of the money that actually pays me to work full-time doing this comes from licensed sales. And we have had a significant decrease in licensed sales. In 2020, we had, I believe, 94 to 100 licenses. Last year, we had 54. And this year, it looks like we're going to have significantly less than that.
Is this commercial?
Yes. So recreational licenses, we'll sell 150 to 200 recreational licenses. And that includes all types of recreational license. And if you're ever interested in digging clams, it's $25, payable to the town of Franklin. But, so we've had a significant decrease, which is bad for the program, because then that puts us in financial strain. And there are many reasons for that. There is a decrease in clam harvests from 2024 to 2025. But how the state analyzes what it is, it's like per, pounds per hour worked, because of how many clam diggers you actually have digging there. And what we're kind of seeing at the numbers is that is steady, but we've decreased rapidly. We've had 3 or 4 shellfish harvesters who have passed away because they were in their 60s or 70s. They are not being replaced. There is nobody teaching their children how to dig clams. It is a dying art, and I wish I could be more optimistic about that, but we can be. Clamming is a good industry to get into. I'm trying to convince my 13-year-old son that buying him a $100 license and sending him out on the mud while I'm working, dropping him off somewhere, and he can go out there and bust his back for a few hours and come home with some pretty decent money if he wants it. And I grew up clamming and lobstering, so yes.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you is, per hour, how much can a good clammer make?
It depends on what the price is, it fluctuates so much.
Right.
So in the spring, the price is about $2 or less per pound. And then in the summer, this time of year, it can be anywhere from $3 to all the way up to close to $6 per pound. And depending on where you're harvesting, a decent harvester, even if they're digging in clay, could get 80 to 120 pounds of clams. They might be able to do even better than that, depending on where they are. So it can become a very lucrative industry seasonally. And you'll see people, we have plenty of clam harvesters that come out and they only dig when the money is really high. Everybody calls that gravy digging, but they do. They come out when it's really high and they dig then. I think it's somewhat intelligent, but they cash in on that investment when it's $6 a pound and it's around July 4th or Memorial Day, or even Christmas. The highest price I've ever seen was Christmas.
So would that be like 80 pounds in 2 hours? Or
I tied. Yeah, like 3-4 hours. And I've seen a lot more than that. There was a gentleman who was digging in the gonk that had a few bushel, and it was our closures are closed on Sundays, and he was digging it on a Sunday, and he had to put all of them back in. Yeah, it was there. And that's to reduce harvesting pressure, to give the flats time to heal, to give the landowners a reprieve from having harvesters parked in their driveways. That's why we do those things, and give me kind of a reprieve too. So,
Well, you talk to the group about the different little round symbols and what those mean and who does the testing.
yes, so, water quality testing is done by state of Maine. With assistance from people can participate and assist with that if water quality needs testing done. And you'll see in the spot, like they have testing spots that they're testing from. And that is a very intensive job, and in summer it increases more and more. And there's other types of closures, like rainfall closures. If we get too much rain, they will close the flats for a period of time. And that's to ensure the safety and health of everybody that's eating the shellfish. Yes?
How are the conservation closures assessed? Do they do sampling or?
Well, so that is our goal, is to do sampling and surveys of the closures, especially if it's a new run that we're putting in place. We have some that are on rotation that we just rotate through yearly, summer, winter. Because the winter ones are easy access points that they can walk down a hill and it never ices in. So we want to keep that open for them, the 10 or 15 shellfish harvesters that stay digging all winter long. I think we could, use improvement on doing more scientific studies, but that is labor intensive, and we would need potentially volunteers to assist us with that in the future.
Could you address the green dots and how you conditionally look at them all? Is that what you do?
No, so that's the state of Maine's job. They assess the water quality in those. I have asked them if they need assistance, and they don't currently need assistance with that. And they do water quality sampling on that, and I can't speak to their exact scientific method that they do with water quality testing.
You can look on the website though, and they show you all of that. And you go runs that.
Yeah, of the 7 streams, and then the 4 in the middle, but
Yeah. Yes, sir.
What are the rates of clamor to private roads and driveways to access flats?
They have none beyond handshake agreements, traditional usage access. A lot of them have traditional access. They've been going down this road for 30 years with access, and then somebody buys the property and closes access to that person. Of course, that is the property owner's right to do, but we're trying to maintain access. We have a situation with that right now where we're trying to maintain access to private road association. And that's going to be a struggle. The state of Maine is trying to encourage landowners to allow access.
Cut their taxes.
But a little tiny bit, but, and also, I know Gouldsboro has agreements for land use access, and eventually we would like to do the same thing as well. And if anybody here has a good spot for land use access, you can talk to me or talk to the town of Franklin, and we could potentially come up with a agreement to maintain access for shellfish harvesters. And shellfish harvesters only, because this is how they make their living. I can't stress that enough. Like, it's not a seasonal fun thing that they do to make a little extra money. We have probably 30, 35 harvesters that this is expressly how they make their living all the time.
What is your beat? What is the area you cover?
Oh, from Ellsworth to the Gouldsboro line. And we have a part-time warden too, but he fills in. He mostly works in the summer when we have really high harvesting pressure. But it's a large area to cover. Depending on what calculations you use, it's 500 miles of coastline. Yeah, 400 to 500, depending on what islands you count, and so on and so forth. So we have, for equipment, we have a cruiser, we have a boat. These are more recent investments that the program has made to better allow me to enforce on areas that are rarely touched. And there is a lot. And you could go out, for example, I had a complaint that somebody was digging illegally in what they call the gunk in Hancock. And there was no access point to that. So I had to drive down a private driveway, knock on the door, talk to the homeowner, and then walk 1.5 miles along the shore to get to the point and find out that there was a legal harvester.
Where is that?
Where is it going?
Hanks. So the old railway pond.
Oh,
pond.
yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah.
That whole area.
Yeah.
There's no real good access there. You can walk the trail.
Yeah.
That's the one place I've gotten lost here.
How do they get there? By
Hey, keep
boat?
going, you come out down the,
Yeah.
the hardware store.
They go by boat out of Kilkenny. So where the old bridge
on the other
was,
side.
Route 1 bridge, they go out of there, or they actually go out of Lamoine State Park,
Yeah.
or the beach, Lamoine Beach, that area. So they go around. But here, most everybody here that's harvesting, that's open in the winter. That side is open in the winter. They're parking there at the turnout, the scenic turnout, and they're walking down. It looks like a really steep hill. There's a road that they hang onto, and then they walk down there in the winter. Or they access through the graveyard is another access point.
Yep.
In the graveyard back here is another access point they use, and those are public access points. But there are certainly other places that they're just parking somebody's driveway in the off season. You may have a summer home, and maybe if you have cameras, you review and you see that somebody's been parking your driveway all winter long and going to dig clams. It's totally possible. Yes.
How does one find a map with public access points? If you bought a license and you want to try it,
Yeah.
how do you find public access?
So and that's a really good point. We don't have a current map of that.
So all the guys, the 30 guys that do it for a living, they're never gonna tell you.
Right. So, and I mean this I mean this in the best possible way, because I grew up in this industry. Fishermen of all types are territorial creatures. They are incredibly territorial about where they dig, and I understand it's their income. Like my father fished the same, we laid traps in the same area that his grandfather did. Like we just owned that bottom. It was ours. Not officially, but morally.
So if I purchase a license, my
Yep.
point is,
Yeah.
how do I, because I don't live here year round,
Yep.
how do I know where I can access and rate them and dig them?
I think in the future, the plan is we want to start engaging with the community more and encouraging license purchase, either recreational or otherwise. We have set recreational harvest areas that recreational harvesters can go to. Thompson's Island, by the way, is a great place to go to if you want to dig shellfish and you just want to dig a deck. If you don't know anywhere else to go. But I'm sure anybody here that's been digging recreational for a long time knows where else to go. But we recommend people go there. It's real easy public access. It's part of the park. You just walk off and you just dig clams. And there's Thompson's Island has there's quahogs there, and there's soft shell and mussels as well. But
One more question. if I may.
yeah,
Once you take them out and you put them in a container,
yeah,
what's the proper way to store them? How long do they live?
they can live quite a while, but you can't have a container that has standing water in it. It has to have holes to be able to drain out. That's why these all have labs in it, so it drains out. If they sit in that stagnant water, you can have problems very quickly depending on the weather.
Refrigerator?
Yeah, take them home, put them in a refrigerator, but they can last depending on the weather, like hours and hours just out of the mud. They close up, they button up, and they just kind of sit there. I mean, if it's 120 degrees out, I wouldn't leave them out baking in the sun. I've seen that happen. A harvester leave them up high and not cover them with rockweed, and then half of them have died while he was out digging because they're in the blazing hot sun. Oysters are trickier. Oysters are more susceptible to bacteria and other issues. There's Vibrio, which is a bacterial condition that's moving up the coast. It hasn't quite made it here yet, but it's in Belfast. So we're at that point. And yeah, so I mean, there's a lot of stuff to this. There is a shellfish harvester's handbook that has been made. that is available for free online. It's PDF. I don't know if you want to print off all 100 pages, but you know, it's available for you.
License cost for a citizen, non-commercial?
Non-commercial license, resident license is $25, recreational license.
Non-resident is 50.
Yeah, non-residents 50. And then of course we have senior licenses and which decrease more from that point. A commercial harvester's license is $700. And a non-resident commercial harvester's license
1,200.
is $1,200. So, yes, sir.
We ran into some wormers down in Old Pond and talked to them for the railroad bridge.
Yep.
And they were referring to problematic areas in Taunton Bay with regard to dangerous areas for walking. That
Yes.
are really safe.
Absolutely. Yes. So, the mud conditions, and I'm not an expert in this at all, because I grew up harvesting clams a little bit and now enforcing it. And I go to where they're harvesting. But, you know, what they call a honey pot, where, you know, it's really just quicksand. That's more or less what it is, but it's really thin mud. And if you see if you're walking along, there's nice little mounds of mud everywhere, and then it's a really flat, like glass flat area, don't step there. That's kind of a clue, but when I first started this job, I almost stepped right into one until some clam digger yelled at me. Because I'm going across the game. Yes?
I was just wondering if you had a square, maybe 6 foot by whatever size, and you left it alone for 5 years, would there be a better type of clam in there? Or if you went every 3 months or every week, whatever you do, to leave clams in that spot, what would the difference be? Is it better to leave them where they get too big or they just die?
Well, it's really hard to determine because the marketable size for clams is 2 inches and a little bit more. But they actually are starting to pay more for 2-inch clams. Conversely, 2-inch clams is the legal minimum size. So the market is pushing the clam harvesters to harvest the minimum legal size, which clearly can cause conflict. But clam harvesters should have a way to measure clams, especially if it's not something you do every single day. So I don't know if any of you know. Yeah, I'm not handcuffing anybody.
Not yet.
So that's a legal 2-inch ring for clam. So they put, longest axes, and they put it up against here, and if it touches, it's legal. If it pushes through, it's not legal. Even if you kind of push it a little bit, that's when you get obviously a little gray zone, but then they get out of the water and they shrink and then it's legal. So I recommend people don't keep those, because then I do measurements and you'll get a ticket. If you have, there's a tolerance, but if you get to 13-14% of the clams that are undersized, you're much more likely to get a summons from me for having short clams. But in the 2 years that I've done this, I've only written 1 citation for short clams. The rest of them have been for having no license. So people would call poaching. They're a worm digger and they've decided that the price of clams is $6 a pound today, and I'm going to go make some extra money. And then I find them. The last thing I'll say is about mussels. Frenchman's Bay is one of the few municipalities in the state of Maine that likes to put our input on mussel dragging. And mussel dragging last year was a significant issue for this program. Dawn's staring off into the distance. It's stressful, but it caused a lot of problems. Not up here so much, because the large mussel dragging boats can't get up here, and there's not really enough mussels to commercially drag here. But this is more for everybody's information. But in the Skillings River, there is significant mussel dragging that is going on. And that is detrimental or we believe is detrimental to clam habitat if they are not dragging correctly and appropriately. We had a mussel dragging boat that dragged over one of our conservation closures. It was also a closure for mussels. and he just ignored it and kept getting tickets. That was his solution to the problem. But that is an exception. Most of the mussel dragging boats are law-abiding and very accommodating. But we do have ones that come through here, and a mussel dragging boat can do more damage to the flat out there than 500 clam diggers in 10 years. They can obliterate it if they don't do it appropriately. But I agree, they need to make a living as well. So
I was under the impression that Taunton Bay itself above the falls was restricted to any kind of
yes,
mussel dragging. Is that
Yes.
not correct?
yes, it is.
It is?
Yes. So we allow raking, but we don't really have. There's mussel beds right over there. And there's a couple others, but other than that, there's not a huge population of mussels. And that's a pretty thick mussel bed on that side. But we don't have many mussel boats that come up here. It's just more for information for the program wide. This program is very proactive and wants to ensure that we have a resource for the future generations, and that we also build up the amount of shellfish harvesters that we have again. So, any final questions before I walk away?
Thank you.
So,